Okay, good evening, everyone. It's time for revelations about raising myself. So, as I've mentioned, these lives, these streams are about the things that I've realized in my journey, the things that have contributed to my evolution, my raising my value as a person, as a partner, as a friend, as a human being, basically. And I've had lots of these little revelations, aha moments, epiphanies, and this was a big one. And it's taken me a long time to work on this one because it is so big. I heard one of my coaches years ago mention that everything we do is for an emotion. And I thought that was a bit of a strange sort of statement to make. What do you mean we're doing it for an emotion? And he was absolutely right. And I put a lot of thought into this because as a typical male, one of the things I tended to do was to suppress certain emotions, to ignore certain emotions, to disown other emotions. And I ended up being scattered and broken and bits and pieces all over the place. And it wasn't a healthy place to be. And then I decided that I would become more in touch with my emotions. So this was about 16, 17 years ago. And what I decided to do is I did a Excel spreadsheet and I listed a heap of emotions on there, both positive and negative. And at the end of every day, I would sit there and go, okay, where today did I feel pride? And I would think back on my day and go, oh, okay, I did a good job there. I was happy with that, or I was proud of myself for helping someone, or whatever it was. And then I remembered what it felt like. So I was reassociating myself with that emotion. And then I would work my way down the list and again, various positive and negative emotions until I got to the end and I found that I'd checked off a fair amount. And I did this for months on end because what I wanted to do was familiarize myself with the emotion, how it felt, where it positioned itself in my body, how I then reacted afterwards. So, all of these things got me back in touch with my emotions. And the wonderful thing about that is once you're in touch with your emotions, they don't tend to be as intense. Because when you're, say, for example, anger, because this is a typical one where when we suppress our anger, when we disown it, when we push it down, it tends to pop up in very volatile ways. So we tend to blow our top over things that aren't important. So things like my anger, I had to recognize it and split it up. So with my anger, was it pure rage? Was it frustration? Was it disappointment? Which of the angers was it? So that I could get more in touch with my anger and all of my emotions and deal with them better. So that enabled me to eventually get a control on my conflict and things like that because I wasn't particularly good at that. But it also allowed me to get in touch with other emotions. And I had some revelations about emotions, and I might have learnt this first part from somewhere. I'm reasonably sure I did. And then I sort of extrapolated it from there. So someone had once said that negative emotions are based in fear. And I thought about that for quite some time, and they're right. And what I did is I slowly changed how I looked at my emotions because for me, words are very powerful. You need to be able to say what it is you mean, and you need to have a strong enough vocabulary that you can adequately communicate what it is you're feeling, what your intention is, what your goal is, whatever it is you're trying to communicate. Having a good vocabulary and being in touch with your emotions enables you to do that. Anyway, what I realized was there's no such thing as positive and negative emotions. It's just a label that we put on them. However, if you're going to put labels on them, you may as well make them labels that are going to work for you instead of against you, because we've all heard of the book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. Great book. I read it. Absolutely stand by it. Wonderful. Focus on your positives. Trouble is, though, life has negatives. And if you ignore them, if you're only focusing on the positives, the negatives are going to bite you in the ass. So what you need to do is have a better understanding of how emotions work. And what I realized was this: if negative emotions are based in fear, positive emotions have to be based in love, which would be the opposite, because positive, negative, fear, love. So what I did is I decided to create labels that better illustrated how we can use those emotions. So what I realized, and it's absolutely helped me heaps, is a negative emotion, or one that's based in fear, gives you an opportunity to learn something about yourself, to be able to push your boundaries, to be able to raise your value, to become a better version of yourself. So when you have something where it's fear based, you're scared of losing it, it enables you to look at that, get the lesson, and then that emotion loses some of its power against you because you're less fearful of that emotion. And I'll explain in a second. Now, the other emotions, the positive emotions, are based in love, and I call them the living emotions. So the learning emotions give you a greater opportunity to have more of the living emotions. So if you take your learning emotion, let's say I've got disappointment on something. All right. So I had expectations of someone. They let me down on those expectations, and I've got a disappointment. Okay, so I'm now feeling that disappointment. So I can think about it and where it sits in my body, how it feels, allow myself to actually feel it, allow it to permeate into my body and feel that disappointment, and then go, okay, what's the lesson in this? And it might be that I was putting my expectations on that person, not taking into account their values, their priorities. So therefore, I set them up to fail. So therefore, my lesson to me is don't project my values, my expectations, my goals onto other people, expecting them to follow what's important to me, because what's important to them is important to them, not necessarily important to me. So that then means that when I'm with that person and I've got that lesson, it enables me to have more of the living emotions to use with that person and enjoy them for who they are. So a very quick explanation of that. So for me, uncovering, re-owning, embracing all of my emotions has made a huge difference. And in fact, I had in a situation quite some time ago now. I was driving along with my wife, and I tend to get frustrated a lot with driving. It's probably the one thing that winds me up the most. Anyway, this bloke had cut me off, and I was ranting a bit. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Are you finished?" And I stopped and I went, "Actually, no, I'm not. I want to feel angry." So for a few minutes, I sat there and I felt the anger. I felt the tension in my body. I felt the blood pressure rising. I felt the color coming into my face. And I muttered and I groaned and I gnashed my teeth. And I did that for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then I went, yeah, that's enough of that. So allowing myself to feel it, also looking at what's the lesson in it for me so that it doesn't affect me as much. So I'm a lot better than I used to be. I still get frustrated, and in a way it's fun. However, I make sure I don't get lost in that emotion, because the worst thing you can do is lose yourself in an emotion and waste a lot of time. So all your so-called negative emotions or your learning emotions, if you spend too long looking for the lesson, you don't have enough time left over or enough energy left over for the living emotions. So my lesson for you, if you want to take it, is to learn to get back in touch with your emotions, learn to understand them all, learn to own them all, learn to be able to assimilate them into your life so you can get the lessons, so you can have more of the good stuff in life. So that's it for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any questions or anything like that that you want me to answer, explore, whatever, I'll continue to just tell you my lessons. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for giving me 10 minutes of your life. Um, I hope I've made it worthwhile, and I look forward to catching you in a fortnight's time. Look after yourself and take care.